Welcome everyone to Rebuilding Me 101 Facebook group. Our discussion tonight is going to be on what mood are you in and how does what you ate earlier today affect that? We're going to get into serotonin and how and where does that come from? What's the difference between serotonin and dopamine? And how much does what you eat change your whole perspective even on life? So we're going to get a little bit into the science. We're going to show some really cool pictures of some of the communication vessels that are in the place where serotonin is made. So I'm going to do a screen share again, and we're going to keep this real simple, so I hopefully won't have any of the issues we had, and this will help illustrate the very things we were talking about. Let's get this in the full scope. Hey, you ever move something and it like doesn't want to go and it flies right back to where you don't want it? Y'all see this? I think you can all see this, right? Okay. So if this is kind of a cool thought here, we've got serotonin is actually made from the place that we see shown right here, and that is your gut. Your gut, the whole level of your gut starts from the evacuation center in your anus in the back, all the way up to your esophagus. And do you know that that is about 30 feet long? And within that gut is the nerve cells that produce serotonin. Serotonin is the chemical that makes us feel good. If you look right here, it is a chemical that the nerve cells produce. It sends the signal between your nerve cells. You may remember I keep showing this video of something we talked about in the past about the brain, the way the brain communicates. It's look like knuckles, and you've got the cleft there and so forth. Well, the serotonin is one of the chemicals that help make that communication possible, not only through the brain cells, but the same type of neurons are in the gut. And the gut is the 90% of the serotonin. What makes you feel good is produced in your gut. Sometimes I listened to some interviews and did some research of doctors that were interviewing people that were very depressed, even suicidal, and the doctors were able to trace when things started going wrong in their life to when their diet changed. So we're going to discuss a little bit about how important gut health is and how we create the gut health by what we eat, and subsequently and indirectly now, or we could say directly, we can actually impact our moods by what we've been eating over a period of time, because we can change the whole environment where this serotonin is produced. And I will add this, our recent discussions about the brain and even the honey and what we've gotten into has talked about the importance of not having a toxemia or some of the other chemicals or lack of chemicals in the brain from our diet. So a high glucose, high carbohydrate diet also creates a disconnect in those synaptic neurons in the communication in the synaptic cleft. But we're going to show a picture, and I'll do it real quick. I'm going to go way ahead of time, go way down here. Let's see if I can get to this one and show you what one of those nerves look like right there. Now, that's the communication and the neurons. This is one similar to the gut. They are now finding out that in the gut, there are 5 different subsets of neurons with different shapes. And scientists are firmly believing that they do different things. I'm going to get a little ahead of the game here. For example, not only do they monitor the mechanical flow of the peristaltic movement of, let's say, solids through your colon for evacuation, but they can even tell when you're experiencing pain or hunger. And I'll go into that a little bit more. But this is a sample of the same neurons that exist under your skin that transmit to the nervous system and then the vagus nerve and send signals up to the brain. We'll get into that a little bit more when we get to that picture. but I wanted to just give you a little heads up on that to help explain again the importance of serotonin. But let's go back to how we can impact this serotonin. As we see here in the green print and the bold letters, this helps play a huge role in regulating your mood. The serotonin is an essential amino acid. It's made from, have you ever recognized this? Have you ever heard where this is from? Tryptophan? Does that sound familiar? A lot of people around Thanksgiving are worried about the tryptophan because they say it makes you a little sleepy. Well, amazingly, the serotonin that your body creates in those neurons and the communication needs that from different things we eat. And tryptophan is one of the things. We'll have some examples of where they're found. It's other places besides turkey and poultry. So you can see here, it's already hinting at it. You've got dairy products, eggs, and nuts. As we mentioned, 90% of your serotonin is produced in that gut microbiome. So it's very important to monitor what we eat. If you're not feeling good and life is getting worse and worse and heavier, a good place to begin is what you eat. Some of the places you can impact that serotonin. Let's briefly discuss some of them. There are supplements. There's controversy about that because there could be adverse effects. But St. John's wort, you may have seen that in health food centers. That evidently is an herb that some people feel is effective for helping to treat depression and to support the serotonin. Here's some of the foods. As you can see, this is where the tryptophan comes from, as well as they encourage the support of serotonin, turkey or poultry as shown here, but fatty fish we'll get into a little bit more. That's really good. And of course you see nuts. And I think many of you ladies would like to see up in the upper right-hand corner, we got dark chocolate. Yes, believe it or not, you have permission. We'll get into some of that. Natural boosters, before we get a little bit more into some pictures and specifics on the diet. Sunlight and exercise. And if you can do both together, we don't have time to get into the scope of the value of the morning and evening sun and the way the eyes will filter it and send it to your pineal gland, which is some people have called the third eye, which actually stimulates your creativity and so forth. But here's what's cool. If you have problem with your circadian rhythm, little side point here, the morning and evening sun is like resetting your biological clock. If you've been burning the midnight oil and you're up late and you're looking at computer screens and blue light and so forth, and your sleep patterns are off, make it a point to see some of the morning and evening sun, because the eye recognizes that, sends the message to the pineal gland, and the brain now resets your circadian rhythm over time. If you can include exercise with that, of course, that is huge. Both of those things contribute to helping to build the serotonin and support it and encourage it. Another thing that's mentioned is meditative, calm breathing, focusing calm in the moment in your whatever way you may do that, and practice your breathing. Anything that can relieve the stress, all of this can help your levels of serotonin. So let's get a little more specific into some of the healthy foods, which we've already touched on. Fatty fish, salmon is a great one. Salmon has lots of value for the omega-3 acids that are in there. These fatty acids are needed, of course, and they definitely impact your mood. Big change, we've got albacore tuna, and we've already mentioned some of the other happy things like dark chocolate. And just for a keto point of view, I think if I remember correctly, anything over 75% cocoa is okay. And you want to be careful of the grams because they are carbohydrates. So if we're doing keto, you can have a little, does affect your mood, as many people believe and attest to. Scientists are still looking for the backup, but all surveys and everything seem to indicate that that is one of the things that can help trigger a good mood. And one of the reasons for that, if you look at the notes underneath here, is a cascade of feel-good compounds. Now, we recognize caffeine, as you may see on the screen, but also it has these other compounds, and I'm not going to try to pronounce them exactly. But what's interesting is these substances are chemically similar to cannabinoids. Do you recognize the word cannabinoids as in cannabis? As in, you know, so evidently there's some similar elements or compounds in there that have almost a drug-like effect on the brain and a calming effect as well. Now, here's a shout out to Rita and Alan, the fermented food capital of Michigan. And I know Rita does a great job making some fermented foods. Evidently, they can do a lot to support serotonin. If you consider what we just mentioned about where serotonin is made, over 90% of it is made in the gut. And as you know, fermented foods support healthy microbiome, healthy gut, and increases the good bacteria. And so, of course, fermented foods should be in our diet for that reason. Incidentally, fasting, again, fasting is it's uniquely qualified to support good gut health because it does two things. When we fast, believe it or not, your body does not starve the healthy bacteria. In fact, it still thrives. But guess what does starve in the gut is the unhealthy bacteria. So, giving your system a break, the bad bacteria, as it were, the things that feed on sugar and all the other things that begin carcinogenic syndromes and the depressions that we've talked about are eliminated naturally. So can you imagine having fermented food, fasting, and then maybe even having a little bit of the fermented food while you're on a fast? You could really be helping to rebuild your gut health, which, as we're discussing today, is the ultimate goal of changing our whole outlook in life by our moods. Good fermented foods, as you see mentioned in our top line here, kimchi, yogurt, kefir, kombucha, sauerkraut. And just a little point on this, maybe later you can verify this, but if I'm correct in this, is the sauerkraut that you want is the kind that must be refrigerated because it's alive. You can get sauerkraut in the market. I think the real benefit is the ones with live cultures. They have to be refrigerated, just like kefir or yogurt. So you may keep that in mind. When you're buying your hot dogs and there's a big bag off to the side, it may not be fermented, but maybe we can ask Rita and Alan a little bit more on that, but I think that's true. Why is this important? Because the probiotics are created. Incidentally, honey, which we talked about last week, is a prebiotic. Do you know the difference between a prebiotic and a probiotic? Probiotic is is the healthy bacteria, the live cultures. Prebiotic is the food for those cultures. You must feed them to keep them healthy. So a prebiotic, one of the best foods, is raw honey. And once again, remember we said you can't really be on the keto diet and have any meaningful amount of honey, but it is a great transition. Or if you take a break and you do a cleanse or whatever, use your own judicious, good judgment, but just keep that in mind. So honey, as we've been mentioning, has a lot of the same benefits as a fast and as keto, but it's almost impossible to stay in ketosis, as we said in our talk. Okay, so you can see the things that are serotonin is a neurotransmitter, affects many aspects of our life. It affects all your behavior, your mood, stress responses. How quickly can you respond to stress at your job, in your life, what you're going through? All of these are impacted by serotonin, even your sex drive, as it mentioned. So it's amazing the full scope that it has. 90%, once again, is produced in your gut microbiome. And in addition to this, it plays a huge role in your brain health because there is a huge connection. And this is what we're going to start talking about as we started off with. The gut bacteria is often called the second brain. Now, here's something I learned doing this research that a year ago I gave a talk on hormones and ghrelin and some of the other different hormones that affect whether or not you feel full. That has been corrected by some new research I came on. You will know in milliseconds because of the neurons in your gut when you're full, if everything is working properly. That is a huge benefit, a big change from in the past when we talked about the hormones don't always give the right signals. It takes time to go through the blood. Once it gets to the brain reads the message. Well, that's still true, and that's a big part of things. Nevertheless, the gut is milliseconds. Scientists are amazed. The connection, as we saw, and we're going to see in a few minutes again, that neuron is directly tied to the vein or the nervous system that goes down the back of your spine called the vagus nerve. Within milliseconds, before I can snap my fingers, messages are being sent to the brain. Now, here's a cool point. Well, I'll get into that when I always want to get ahead of myself because I love what we're going to talk about there. Let's get into a little bit more and some of the foods you can get serotonin and it can help your moods. Berries, keto diet. Can you eat berries? Yes, you can, especially if you're well into being keto adaptive. Do not eat a lot of them, but you can have close to, I think it was almost a cup. Just watch the carbs because if you go over the 20 grams, but the sugar content is fairly low. Most berries, keep in mind a strawberry has a little bit more sugar. So blueberries, mulberries, some of the smaller berries are okay, and it's really nice to throw them in a salad or in a little bit of kefir or some yogurt with no sugar. Why are they so good? Well, it's the antioxidants, the phenolic compounds. All of these do a great job combating oxidative stress. You might remember last week's talk, we said, what is oxidative stress? It's in all kinds of medical journals and everything about your health. Remember we said if you left an apple cut on the table, it would brown. The oxygen begins to age. Same thing happens in our body. You might liken it to rust on iron. That's another example of oxidative stress. So we can rust, as it were, if we've got too much oxidative stress going on in our system. We're like the Tin Man who needs some oil, you know. So if you can't find fresh vegetables, is it okay to buy frozen? What do you all think? Can you nod if that's a good thing or is that a bad thing? What do you think? Yeah, it's a good thing. Yep. Denise Aubrey says half and half, maybe. One of the reasons it can be a good thing is if you can't get really fresh from a farm, most of them are fresh frozen. So rather than being picked early and allowing for trucking and sending it everywhere and some decay or from some ripening, they're frozen pretty quick and they're picked at their peak ripeness. Say that 3 times fast. Peak ripe. Nuts and seeds. Speaking about me going nuts. Nuts and seeds, a lot of benefits. One of the things we want to mention again, here's where the tryptophan can come from. The amino acids that are responsible. You can get them in almonds, cashews, peanuts, walnuts, pumpkin, sesame, sunflower. Again, I would encourage you to check the carb content. We've already discussed that sometimes almonds can be the good ones, and I think we said pecans can be really lower in the carbohydrate. One of the things that's interesting, the 10-year study mentioned here with almost 16,000 people linked moderate intake of nuts. 23% had lower risk of depression. So that's worth mentioning. I would highly recommend, as you see in the green print here, in fact, I recommend daily to have 1 or 2 Brazil nuts. Those are the big nuts you find sometimes. They used to get the assorted nuts and you threw them out so you could get to the ones you liked because those were big and you weren't sure. But those have selenium and zinc, and they have a pretty high content. So if you had 2 good sized ones a day, you would take care of selenium, which is very important for losing weight. And both of those are very important for brain functionality. And there's the Brazil nuts right there. I would not eat that whole bowl. The human gut, I'm going to share this with you, 100 million nerve cells. Imagine that. The 30 feet from your backside to your esophagus, there's 100 million nerve cells. In fact, many times they will initiate, for lack of a better word, a thought and send it to the brain, and the brain will take the information and work on it. We used to think the brain would be down there filtering. The neurons in your gut do not need a question or a stimulus from the brain. They can initiate stimulus and send it to the brain with instructions. Good example, if you don't believe that, have you ever felt like you were going to vomit and you had to run to the bathroom so you could get to a place where you could evacuate? Your brain is trying to say, no, wait, give me a minute. The stomach is saying, now. So that can initiate thoughts, especially when it comes to evacuating things or letting you know you just had something very bad or you're feeling sick. No other part of the body can send a message the way that the gut can. So does that not illustrate the importance of keeping a healthy gut? You will literally be shutting down communication in your brain that could save your life if you started messing with the neurons in your gut by, incidentally, processed foods, lots of carbohydrates, things that clog up your system. So that is really, really important to know. And here is again an example of a neuron cell. Once again, this is similar to the ones in your gut, but this is one, a real one from under the skin, where it too connects to your whole nervous system. This clinician scientist says the study reveals a whole new set of pathways that use gut cells to rapidly communicate. And this is where I got the information on the millisecond right away. So yes, the question is what you eat can help or hurt your digestive system, he says. And notice this, because this is what our whole talk was about, and influence how you feel. So if you're unhappy in life, if you've got challenges and stresses and things, the best place to begin with is what goes across your tongue into your system. So I highly encourage you to think there. At the very least, it will give you the brain power to figure out some of the other things, and it will help you lower your stress and monitor your emotions that may be contributing to the imbalance in your life. So where to start in our quadrant? We always talk about physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. Here's another justification: is the first place to begin is on this journey is in your physical realm, and that starts with food as one of the primary. All righty, folks. You're welcome to unmute